The observation deck of Haven Prime's diplomatic complex hummed with tension as Lieutenant Marcus Vale adjusted his tactical vest for the 100th time that morning. Through the reinforced transparasteel windows, 3 moons hung like pearls. Against the amber sky, their surfaces dotted with the gleaming spires of orbital defense platforms. This wasn't some remote space station. This was the beating heart of human civilization, where the Unity Accords would either usher in a new age of peace or collapse into the bloodiest war the galaxy had ever seen. Marcus had protected diplomats before, but never one like Ambassador Serathi. Standing 7 feet tall in her ceremonial armor, she commanded attention like a force of nature. Her blue skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, while the crystalline horns that crowned her head pulsed with barely contained energy. The ethereal conclave had sent their finest warrior diplomat, and Marcus understood why. Lesser beings might have been intimidated by the hostile crowds gathering outside Haven Prime's medical district, where protesters held signs demanding humanity's withdrawal from conclave space. Lieutenant Zerathi's voice carried the harmonic, undertones that all ethereals possessed, but hers held something different, a warmth that her people would have considered weakness. Your tactical assessment of today's route? Marcus pulled up his datapad, highlighting the path through Haven Prime's sprawling medical quarter. 3 potential choke points between here and the Treaty Hall, Ambassador. A trauma center on 5th Avenue creates natural cover for hostiles, and the pediatric wing's been evacuated as a precaution. My team has eyes on every rooftop, every entrance. What he didn't mention was how her curious questions about human medicine had surprised him during their security briefings. While other conclave members dismissed human flesh healing as primitive, Serathi had asked detailed questions about surgical procedures, about how humans could repair their fragile bodies with such precision. It was as if she were trying to understand something her own energy-based existence couldn't grasp. Your dedication honors both our species, she said, and Marcus caught something in her luminous silver eyes that made his breath catch. For just a moment, the imposing alien diplomat looked almost vulnerable. The moment shattered as his comm unit crackled to life. Falcon Leader, we have movement in the medical district. Unidentified figures in the children's hospital parking. Structure. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. Copy that. Maintain overwatch. He turned to Serathi, his protective instincts flaring. Ambassador, I recommend we delay the departure by 15 minutes. But Zerathi's horns pulsed with determination. The treaty cannot wait, Lieutenant. My people have already sacrificed much for this peace. She moved toward the exit with fluid grace, her armor gleaming under Haven Prime's artificial lighting. Besides, I trust you to keep me safe. Those words hit Marcus harder than any commendation he'd ever received. As they made their way through the complex's sterile corridors, passing medical personnel wheeling equipment and families visiting recovering patients, he realized that somewhere between the security briefings and shared meals, the alien warrior had become more than just another assignment. She'd become someone worth dying for. The irony wasn't lost on him as they passed the emergency department's entrance. In trying to understand human fragility, Serathi had made herself vulnerable in ways her people couldn't comprehend. And as the first reports of armed figures moving through Haven Prime's medical sector reached his earpiece, Marcus realized that vulnerability might be exactly what the assassins were counting on. Asterisk, the pediatric wing of Haven Prime Medical Center, stood eerily quiet as Marcus led Serathi through its evacuated corridors. Colorful murals of alien creatures and human children playing together adorned the walls. A vision of the future the Unity Accords promised to create. But the abandoned toys scattered across the floor and the darkened patient rooms served as stark reminders of how fragile that future truly was. The children's artwork, Serathi observed, pausing before a finger-painted portrait of what appeared to be an ethereal and human holding hands. Her crystalline horns dimmed slightly, betraying an emotion her people would have called contamination. They see unity where we see only difference. Marcus's tactical scanner showed 3 heat signatures moving through the hospital's lower levels. Signatures that didn't match any authorized personnel. Ambassador, we need to keep moving. The trauma center's just ahead, and my extraction team is waiting on the other side. But as they rounded the corner into the main medical corridor, Marcus's blood turned to ice. A figure emerged from the shadows between 2 surgical suites tall, wreathed in energy that seemed to bend light around it. The void assassin moved. With predatory grace, its reality-shearing blade humming with power that made the hospital's medical equipment spark and flicker. Serathi of the warrior caste. The assassin's voice echoed as if coming from the space between dimensions. Your contamination ends here. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between the killer and the ambassador. His weapon felt pathetically inadequate against something that existed partially outside normal spacetime, but his training kicked in. Falcon leader to all units code black in Medical 7. Hostile contact, requesting immediate backup. The assassin's laugh sent shivers through the sterile air. Your primitive guardians cannot protect her from what she has become. Lieutenant Vale, she touches your kind with curiosity, speaks of your fascinating resilience, asks questions that betray her corruption. Zerathi's armor blazed with indignant energy, her warrior's pride finally surfacing. I have committed no crime save seeking to understand those we would call allies. Understanding leads to attachment. Attachment leads to weakness. The void assassin raised its blade, reality warping around the weapon's edge like heated air. The conclave's purity will not be compromised by flesh-bound sentiment. Marcus felt time slow as his tactical implants analyzed the threat. The blade was designed specifically to disrupt ethereal energy channels. It would sever Zerathi's connection to her life force, leaving her as helpless as any human. But humans were different. Physical beings who had learned to heal, to adapt, to survive through will alone. Around them, the medical equipment continued its quiet symphony, heart monitors beeping steadily, ventilators breathing for those who couldn't, 4 pumps delivering precisely measured hope. This place was dedicated to preserving life, to fighting death with skill and technology and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. She's not the one who's been corrupted, Marcus said quietly, his finger tightening on his weapon's trigger. You are. You're so afraid of feeling something real that you'd murder someone for asking questions about how we heal our children. The assassin's blade pulsed with deadly energy. Sentiment will not save her, Lieutenant. Your species' weakness. Our strength, Marcus corrected, and in that moment, he understood what Serathi had been trying to grasp. Humans weren't weak because they could be hurt. They were strong because they chose to risk everything for someone else. The assassin struck like lightning, its blade carving through the air towards Zerathi's exposed throat. Marcus saw the attack coming, saw the calculations his implants ran, saw the trajectory that would end with an alien warrior's death in a place dedicated to healing. Without hesitation, without thought for his own safety, Lieutenant Marcus Vale threw himself into the path of a weapon designed to unmake the very essence of life itself. The reality-shearing blade punched through Marcus's chest with a sound like tearing silk. But what followed defied every law of physics he'd ever learned. Where the void assassin's weapon was designed to sever energy connections, it instead found something it couldn't comprehend: the stubborn, illogical determination of human flesh to keep fighting long past any reasonable hope of survival. Marcus hit the medical center's floor hard, his tactical vest smoking from energies never meant to touch organic matter. Around him, the hospital's sophisticated monitoring systems went haywire as residual void energy interfered with their delicate sensors. 4 stands toppled, their life-giving fluids mixing with his blood on the sterile tiles. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as automated systems detected the impossible, a dimensional breach in the middle of their sanctuary of healing. No, Zarathi's voice cracked with an emotion her people had no word for. Her crystalline horns blazed like miniature suns as she channeled power through her armor, forcing the assassin back through sheer fury. You will not take him from me. The void assassin recoiled, its form flickering as it struggled to maintain cohesion against the warrior diplomat's rage. See how quickly corruption spreads. Your attachment to this flesh creature proves the conclave's judgment correct. But Serathi was no longer listening. She knelt beside Marcus in the spreading pool of medical supplies and blood, her armored hands hovering over his devastated chest. The blade had done more than cut it, had torn holes in the very fabric of his being, wounds that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Asterisk. Marcus, she whispered, her harmonic voice breaking into something almost human. Stay with me. His eyes found hers, though speaking sent bubbles of blood past his lips. Did we protect the treaty? The treaty means nothing if you die. For it, the admission tore from her throat like a physical wound. Around them, medical alarms wailed as automatic systems detected critical life signs failing. I should have listened when you spoke of your doctor's skill, when you showed me how your people refused to surrender, even when death seemed certain. The assassin's laugh echoed through the corridor as it prepared to finish what it had started. Sentiment makes you both weak. Watch as your flesh-bound guardian dies, knowing his sacrifice was meaningless. But Marcus's hand found the strength to grip Zarathi's wrist, his tactical implants running one last calculation. Emergency ... protocol, he gasped. Medical 7 lockdown sequence. Your authorization code. Understanding flooded her silver eyes. The hospital's emergency systems would respond to a conclave diplomatic override, sealing the entire section against any threat including dimensional predators. Her fingers flew over his tactical display, entering the codes that would trap the assassin in this sterile maze of healing equipment and human determination. The lockdown engaged with a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the building's bones. Blast doors slammed shut, emergency bulkheads descended, and most importantly, reality stabilizers activated throughout the medical wing. The assassin's form began to solidify as the void energy that sustained it was systematically neutralized by systems designed to protect patients from any possible contamination. Impossible, the killer snarled, its blade flickering as dimensional anchors locked it fully into normal space-time. You cannot cage the void itself. We can, Serathi replied, her voice steady despite the tears that streamed down her blue cheeks, an impossibility for a species that had evolved beyond such crude emotional displays. This is a place of healing, protected by both our technologies, and his people's absolute refusal to let anyone die without a fight. Marcus felt consciousness slipping away, but through the haze of pain, he saw something beautiful. Security forces were breaching the sealed corridor, their weapons designed specifically for dealing with interdimensional threats. The assassin, trapped in normal space, was just another target now deadly, but no longer untouchable. The treaty, he whispered as medical teams rushed toward them with equipment that looked like it belonged in a starship's engine room. Tell me the treaty will be signed, Serathi promised, her horns pulsing with the rhythm of his failing heartbeat, as if she were trying to sustain his life through will alone. Because someone taught me that true strength means risking everything for those who ... She couldn't finish the sentence. In her culture, the word didn't exist for what she felt. But as the medical team surrounded them with instruments of healing and hope, Marcus managed to smile. Love, he completed. The word is love. Asterisk, the intensive care unit of Haven Prime Medical Center had become a tomb of blinking lights and mechanical whispers. Marcus lay connected to a maze of life support systems that painted his vital signs in stark digital clarity across a dozen monitors. His chest rose and fell with artificial precision, each breath delivered by machines that understood the mechanics of survival, but nothing of the will that made it meaningful. Serathi had not left his side for 3 days. The crystalline horns that marked her as conclave nobility dimmed to barely visible embers as she sat in the chair the medical staff had provided, too small for her 7-foot frame, but she refused their offers of more suitable accommodation. Her ornate armor, designed to project authority and power, seemed almost obscene in this sterile environment dedicated to the fragility of organic life. The dimensional wounds are beyond our surgical capabilities, Dr. Sarah Chun explained for the 3rd time, her voice gentle but firm. The void energy has created tears in his cellular structure that exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. We can keep him stable, but the damage cannot be healed by your methods. Serathi finished, her harmonics so muted they barely registered above the room's ambient hum. I understand. What she didn't say was that she also understood the solution. Ethereal life force, properly channeled, could bridge dimensional gaps, could heal wounds that existed between realities. Her people's energy-based existence gave them power over the fundamental forces that held matter together. But conclave law was absolute. Their essence was never to be shared with organic life. The contamination would be considered worse than death. Marcus stirred occasionally, his consciousness drifting like a leaf on an uncertain wind. During his brief moments of awareness, his eyes would find hers, and she would see the question there, not fear of dying, but concern for her well-being, for the treaty, for everything except himself. Stubborn, she whispered, her voice thick, with an emotion that would have horrified her kinsman. Even now, you try to protect others. High Commander Veltar of the Ethereal Conclave arrived on the 4th day, his energy form blazing with cold authority as he materialized in the hospital corridor. Unlike Serathi, he maintained his pure energy state, barely acknowledging the physical world around him. Warrior Diplomat, his mental voice cut through her consciousness like a blade of ice. Your presence here violates protocol. The humans' sacrifice has been noted and will be honored, but your vigil serves no purpose save to demonstrate contamination. Serathi rose from her vigil chair, her armor reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. The lieutenant saved my life. Honor demands honor. Demands you remember your place and your people. Veltar interrupted. Your warrior caste heritage makes you susceptible to primitive emotional attachments, but you will not disgrace the conclave by indulging them further. Through the transparent aluminum window, Marcus's life support systems continued their quiet symphony. The respirator hissed, the heart monitor beeped steadily, and the quantum stabilizer that kept his dimensional wounds from expanding hummed with barely contained energy. He looked so small, surrounded by all that technology, so vulnerable despite the strength that had driven him to shield her from annihilation. He threw himself into the path of a reality-shearing blade, Serathi said quietly. For me. For the treaty. For peace between our peoples. And his sacrifice will be remembered, Veltar replied with the cold compassion of energy given form. But you cannot heal wounds that exist between dimensions, even if you could. His mental voice carried absolute prohibition. The contamination would destroy you both. Serathi's horns pulsed once, a brief flare of defiance. And if I chose contamination over watching him die, then you would cease to be conclave. You would be exiled, stripped of rank and honor, caste, out among the flesh-bound primitives whose weaknesses you had embraced. Veltar energy form pulsed with finality. The choice is yours, warrior diplomat. Your duty to the conclave, or your attachment to a dying human. As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Chon appeared at Zarathay's side, her expression grave. Ambassador, his neural activity is declining. The quantum damage is spreading to his brainstem. We estimate perhaps 6 hours before ... She didn't need to finish. Zarathay could see the truth in the doctor's eyes, could read it in the increasingly frantic beeping of the monitors. Marcus Vale, the human who had asked her about the children's artwork, who had trusted her enough to die for her, was slipping away into whatever lay beyond the reach of both human medicine and ethereal power. 6 hours, she repeated, her voice barely audible above the life support system's dot. In 6 hours, she would have to choose between everything she had ever been and everything she had discovered she could become. Asterisk. At 3:47 a.m. Haven Prime Time, when the medical center's corridors were nearly empty, except for the soft footsteps of night staff, Zarathay made her decision. The monitors surrounding Marcus's bed painted their electronic portraits of a life ebbing away, each digital heartbeat a countdown toward a future she refused to accept. High Commander Veltar had returned to the Conclave fleet, confident that duty would triumph over contamination. Dr. Chun and her team maintained their vigil from the observation room, running calculations and scenarios that all reached the same inevitable conclusion. The quantum wounds were spreading, and human medicine had reached its limits. But Zarathay was no ordinary ethereal. Her warrior caste ancestry had always been an anomaly among her energy-based people too, connected to the physical realm, too willing to risk contamination through direct action. What the Conclave saw as weakness, she now recognized as strength. The same traits that made her an effective diplomat in dealing with organic species now gave her the courage to break every law her people held sacred. I understand now, she whispered to Marcus's unconscious form, her harmonics so soft they barely disturbed the room's sterile air. You asked me about healing, about how humans repair their fragile bodies with such determination. You were trying to show me something my people have forgotten. She began removing her ceremonial armor piece by piece, each segment representing centuries of tradition and honor. The breastplate that bore the Conclave seal, the gauntlets that channeled her warrior's power, the helm that marked her diplomatic rank, all of it set aside until she stood in simple biofabric undergarments, as vulnerable as any organic being. Physical contact, she said, echoing the words her people used as a curse. The primitive weakness that makes flesh-bound creatures cling to each other in their mortality. With infinite care, she gathered Marcus's still form into her arms, his weight solid and real against her chest. The medical equipment protested with alarms as she disrupted sensors and moved IV lines, but she ignored them all. Her crystalline horns began to glow, not with the cold light of Conclave authority, but with something warmer, more personal. Life force sharing, she continued, her voice growing stronger as power built in her horns. The ultimate contamination-giving part of your essence to sustain another being. The energy began to flow between them, her ethereal life force seeking out the quantum wounds that human medicine couldn't touch. Where reality had been torn, her essence poured in like liquid starlight, bridging dimensional gaps with the pure force of her will. The sensation was unlike anything her people had ever described, not contamination, but completion. Emotional attachment, she whispered, as Marcus's vital signs began to strengthen, his body accepting her energy and weaving it into his damaged cells. The dangerous weakness that makes us risk everything for someone else's survival. The monitors went wild as impossible readings flooded their systems. Human and ethereal life signs intertwining, quantum signatures stabilizing, cellular regeneration accelerating beyond anything medical science had ever recorded. Dr. Chun and her team rushed into the room, their instruments barely able to comprehend what they were witnessing. Ambassador, what are you doing? Dr. Chun demanded, though her voice carried more awe than alarm. Breaking the covenant, Serathi replied, her silver eyes blazing with inner fire as the transformation continued. Choosing contamination over duty, discovering that love is not the weakness my people believe it to be, it's the strength that lets us become more than we ever thought possible. Marcus's eyes opened, no longer entirely human, but something new, a bridge between species, between energy and matter, between the cold perfection of the conclave and the stubborn warmth of humanity. When he looked at her, she saw recognition there, and acceptance, and something that transcended the boundaries her people had spent millennia maintaining. The treaty? He asked, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. Will be signed, she assured him, helping him sit up among the tangle of medical equipment that no longer knew how to classify either of them. By the galaxy's first human ethereal hybrid, and an exile who chose love over law. Through the window, Haven Prime's 3 moons painted the medical center in silver light. Somewhere in the Conclave fleet, High Commander Veltar was probably receiving reports of her unprecedented breach of protocol. Somewhere in human space, diplomats were calculating the implications of this miraculous healing. But in this room, surrounded by the tools of human medicine and the glow of ethereal power, 2 beings who had dared to love across impossible boundaries began to plan for a future that would challenge everything both their peoples believed about the nature of strength, sacrifice, and the bonds that could unite even the most different souls in the vast darkness between the stars. The covenant was broken. The real peace could finally begin. Asterisk,